Demba, Jim Den, the Shensia, one, Rajuma, Yanda, one, Zobes, Rivada, Shazon, them one, they were a ship, one, thank you. Given the Vakano, Juan, Lana, Patan, Benam, Sanjay Jim Den, the Beja, Shaja, one, Chas. Chudder, Jazu, Demba, Jim Den, the Shensia. Rajuma, Yanda, one, Zobes, Sanjay, Rivada, Shazon. The Varesha one Jidin Jamba Jivan Duva Jovan Anam Pada Menam Jetamba Sanjay Jumden de Beja Shajatu Chazalon Shadu Jazu Shavu Damba Jumden de Shisha Rajamba Yanda Wan Zobe Sanjay Riva Shazun The Varesha one Jidin Jamba Jivan Duva Anam Pada Menam Jetamba Sanjay Jumden de Beja Shajatu Chazalon Shadu Jazu Shavu Kanze Kanye Zowa Jadu Sajan de na combo de Manage den de churches. Tesekeva Jala Sha Zelo Nanda Kunga Chodo Susan. Ijejazu Seja Humbonda Chaba Jeten Sumna Gombo Chunye Jala Sha Zelo Chenja Demba Chimenda Sendon Dawa Jala Sha Zelo de Rachel Seba Suma. Yame Jenjen Jala Sha Zelo Gombo Tuche Tamje Kembe Dembabo Sonami Yazo. The Shensia Macha, the Taban de Jacha, giving as on the Chido Tenamasho Yoga, Shenjun Jala Cha, the Chena Juvana, Lava Dama Rabu, Shingatamba Yendin, Yenduna Cha, the Devachi and Measure, Gawa Kusun, Rangi Simne Yozo, the Tennis and Yetim, Kamara Rima, Yomazep, Chivradam Melondo, Agenda, Decision. Sonamdia Damje Seba Yokomatum, the Genjan the Gautana, the Chivanatu, Sibel Solim, one Jover show to the teacher, the blessed one, the one beyond, the four destroyer, the complete and perfect, fully awaited me, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, the all the one, supreme guide of beings to the divine, teacher of arts and humans, to you the complete and fully awaited. The blessed, the glorious and conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one beyond, the four destroyer, the complete and perfect, fully awakened me, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, the noble word, supreme guide of beings to the divine, teacher of gods and humans, to you, completely and fully awakened. The blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one beyond, the four destroyer, the completely perfect, fully awakened, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, the noble one, supreme guide of beings to the divine, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the completely and fully awakened. The blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When on supreme among humans you are born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then I prostrate. With pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds. Win up the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme sign, space like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior, having great compassion, teacher having all understanding, the pilgrim inert with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to dustness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtues which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, sublime, pure reality, to that Dharma which pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy fear qualified with the realization, who are devoted to the moral precept, to you the sublime community intended virtue. Do not condemn on the virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous action.
Subdue your mind thoroughly.
This is the teaching of Buddha. Star
on the rush,
the
a
flame
flame
of
of
the
the
light,
light,
an illusion, a drop of dew or bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning in a cloud. See conditioned things as such.
Through these merits, may sentient beings attain rank of all sin,
Subdue the four
fault, and be delivered from emotional suffering of aging, sickness, and death.
Sanje Chono, Soje Chono, Chanju Kwando, Dane Jansu, Nage Jeso Jebe, Sonam Je, Dola Penja, Sanje Drubush, Sanje Chono, Soje Chono, Chanju Kwando, Dane Jansu, Nage Jeso Jebe, Sonam Je, Dola Penja, Sanje Drubush, Sanje Chono, Soje Chono, Chanju Kwando, Dane Jansu, Nage Jeso Jebe, Sonam Je, Dola Penja, Sanje Drubush, Sanje Chono, Soje Chono, Chanju Kwando, Dane Jansu, Nage Jeso Jebe, Sonam Dola Penja, Sanje Drubush,
We go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Gede Bumba Dayano, Geda Juba Jino, Gede Bumba Namleja, Pubisin, Danya Yoga Mayana, Dagi Yoga, Dada Dagi Shivish, Zimmy, Manzimayan Zimaka, Te Yoga Mayende, Manzimayan Zimaka, Kangaton, Nana Jirani Dana, Dada Daginam Zena, Yawanda Bakaja, the Zipin, the Kivase, let on you must say better, let on you one on the day at the Tulu. Tombani Janga, Dago Meche Sanje Namja Dadan, Dameka Meche, Jabra Chow, Simpi Chuyun, Majaba Magaba, Chunin, Tamje Yanda Yanda Yin, Yanda Meme Yanda Mea, then the Sanje Jetamo, Sheme Sheme, Jovan, Nando Meda Tademea, then the Kala, then the country, then the Rishit. Tele Shema, my agent, Jeshema, Sanje Jetin, Temba to Sinju. Tenjimanya Tademe, Chabamanya, Zosanja, Mashoshi, and Yadona, Ransanje, Shene, Tembamila, Dada Shirt of the Session of the Shoje, Kangi to the end, Tawata, Commission, the Bishop of the Quadam de la Chance. Yeah. I think we are in this, is it presenting truth and falsity within the context of the worldly convention through the analogy of the magicianal illusion. So I think here, so the presenting the point of view of the Savatrantrika middle way is to understand the Prasangika school through kind of to clear understanding of the Prasangika school point of view. So this is what you brought it here, to presenting this to compare, to see the difference, how the Prasangika school has negated intrinsic nature. So authentic middle way still kind of, assert things do exist inherently, intrinsically, but still they are negating the truly existing of the phenomena. So, so inherence, the the inherent natures here. This is like, so the designative entity and the basis for the designations. Like the self or person is a designative entity, and the basis for the self to be designated are the body, feeling, and perceptions, like eye consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and then the mental factors and the discrimination awareness. The 5 aggregates are the basis for the designating the self or I. So, here the Sautrantika middle way saying that the self or I is not truly exists, but it has some kind of intrinsic nature. It should inhere within the 5 aggregates. So I think this is the very the essential point, because the Buddhists and non-Buddhists, make distinctions. Buddhists and non-Buddhists is anatma, no self, right? And the Buddhists always said no self, no self. Nothing exists by itself. And non-Buddhists say yes, self, atma, soul. So I think this is the it's very common within the Buddhist school of thoughts, Vibhashaka school, Sautrantika school, mind-only school, and the Sautrantika middle way, and the Prasangika middle way. So they all use the same language, no I, no I. But the Sautrantika middle way and believes that the I should be findable. I should be findable within the basis. So then the question is, the self of the person, how this can inhere within the body or inhere within the feeling or the discrimination or the perceptions. And then Sautrantika middle way says, the self of persons do not exist in here within the body, and then the feeling and discrimination awareness, even the perceptions, but within the 6 perceptions, the mental consciousness. So mental consciousness which continue from the one life to the another life. So the continuation of the mental consciousness is the illustration of I. So the continuity of the mental consciousness is the illustration of I. So the I should be in here within the continuity of the consciousness, particularly mental consciousness.
That's the same as Chittamatra.
Yeah, Chittamatra, mind basis of all, they say. Chittamatra divided the mental consciousness, and then they hold in one particular mental consciousness, which is the mind basis of all. So, from the Prasangika school point of view, this is a whole kind of, made up because of they're afraid of negating the self within the basis. So if that totally refuted the existing self within the basis, and for them, it is a following denialism. So they have to create something to behold. Yes, there is the self. So the mind-only school and created the mind basis of all. So mind basis of all means this is like a field. Mind basis of all like a field. There's a many, field there you plant many seeds. So their particular mental consciousness, which carries all the karmic seeds, and that the mind basis all, or the mental consciousness which carries the karmic seeds, one life to the another's, and then another life. So that mind-only school thinks this is the person, right? So now, and then if this is the mind-only school asserting that the mind basis all is the illustration of I, and does it really kind of, is it become similar to the non-Buddhist school? Non-Buddhist school, they always think the self or I is independent from the mind and body, and by itself, right, it is independent, and the nature of that self or Atma is permanent. So the minority school and the middle way, Swatantika, they think I or the self should be impermanent. It is the functional things. So it is impermanent, but it can be, definable. It can be, there is the illustration of I within the continued mental consciousness. So the Swatantric middle way does not use the language, the mind basis of all, but they says the mental consciousness, continuity of the mental consciousness is me. That mental consciousness goes to this life, to the next life. Right? So you see the difference, although the self does not truly exist, means it appears independent, right? But it's not independent. It's not independent. And it exists within the basis. What is that basis? Continuity of mental consciousness. So they find there's something you can land on. Yeah, the self or I could be land on somewhere, locatable. So there is no fear of losing the existing of I. So that's their comfort zone. So, so why in this the Prasangic school bringing up the Swatantric middle way point of view is to understand the clarity of Prasangic school point of view. Right? So when you see the two, compare two point of view, and then you say, oh, this is the Prasangic school point of view. The Prasangic school, any entity, if you search, examine, is unfindable. That is the nature of the conventional reality. That is the nature of the falsely existing of the phenomena. So you see the non-Buddhist school and the Buddhist. Non-Buddhist school means I is independent. It always kind of, remain above the five aggregates. It exists by itself. Right. So, so because it's independent, so like, the apple is independent from the orange, right? So anything that is the changes within the orange, right? That anything changes within the orange should not be characterized on the apple. So there is kind of, suffering, there's the pain, the happiness, there's the changes within the aggregates. But when it comes to the I, the self, which is Atma, independent, there is no change. Like, cow in cow's owner. Anything that is, changes happening in the cow does not characterize on the cow's owner. Right? So, and the car drivers, like Atma and your aggregates, like your aggregates like a car, and yourself, the I, is like a car driver. So you can leave one car, right, and buy another car. So you leave the old car and go into another new car. So there is the owner, which is independent from its position, possessor and possessions. So this is non-Buddhist school. And Buddhist school says there is no Atma as a permanent entity. Right? So yeah, so this is kind of the very, very the essential point of view, significance point of view, to compare the Buddhist and non-Buddhist. Within the Buddhist, and particularly the Prasangika school says, any entity like do not exist within its own basis. So entity means mental construct, fabrication. So yeah, and now in this Savatantrika middle way, because they kind of assert nothing truly exists, but things do exist inherently. So, and because the when it comes to negating the truly existing of the phenomena, there are many examples, like snake on the rope, and the magicianal illusion, and the dream-like, and the reflection-like. So the Svatantrika, although they negate the truly existing of the phenomena, but they accept the inherent nature. So their best of the example is magicianal illusion. So why they choose this example is, magicianal illusions. Some magicianal, they use the kind of recitation of the mantra. By reciting the mantra, they affect your eye. The mantra kind of affecting on your eye, then they can play, right? So this was saying mantra and the kind of pebble or any kind of stick or whatever they use, and then they turn into elephant or horses. They're just playing. So that magician. So authentic middle way thinks that illusion, like illusory elephant and horse, do exist inherently, because there's the power of the mantras, the power of the substance that produces this illusory like horses and elephant. So it has some kind of intrinsic nature. Now, what does not truly exist is the illusory horse and the elephant is not real horse, not real elephant. That is not truly exist.
So you're saying in the Satantrika, they maintain that the illusion itself has almost like an inherent substance. Is that what you're saying? That it truly, you make some separation between truly existing and inherent.
For example, here, there's a magicianal, and he used the mantra and then substance together, and that's some kind of affecting on your eye. Now he played that the stick or the pebbles turning into elephant and horses and playing there. You are entertained by that, right? So now this illusory like horse and elephant, so the Svatantrika middle way says this produced by the mantra and the substance. There's a something from the mantra and the substance to occur the illusory like horses and elephant.
But since they say that is a product of the mantra,
yeah,
it's produced.
So because it's a product, so there's something occurrence of this product from the substance and mantra. Like a sprout arises from the seed, similarly, this illusory horse, the elephant, is arising from the power of the mantra and the substance. So it's
saying the sprout and the seed. The sprout is already in the seed.
No.
Okay, I'm not following.
Sprout arises from the seed. So here's this. The middle way thinks that sprout arises from the seed. It arises from the seed is the valid reason to think the sprout is intrinsically exist. But there's something, it's not just 100% your projections, it's coming from there, right? So in total projections, and there's maybe the sprout should not be coming from the seed, it just projected by that. So sprout coming from the seed is not mental projection. So authentic middle way said this thing. Yeah. Sprout coming from the seed is not 100% projections. It is the cause and effect, the occurrence of the sprout due to the seed. Similarly, illusory elephant and the horses is also the product of this mantra and the substance. So mantra and the substance is the origin or the source of that, the kind of existing of the occurrence of the horse, the illusory horses, the elephant. So it's coming from there. So there's some kind of truth, some kind of reality there. Now, which one is unreal is becoming real horse and real elephant is not true. Right. So why they don't use example like coil rope as a snake? The coil rope as a snake is total projections. The rope does not produce the kind of snake or anything. So authentic middle way, they don't want to use the example, the coil rope as a snake. They go with the illusory, magician illusions. Magician illusion has one aspect of that is real, another aspect is unreal. The real is there's some kind of it has some origin, it coming from somewhere. That is the real. And what is not real is the horse, the illusory horse as a horse is unreal. Illusory elephant as the elephant is unreal. So they want to make kind of a distinction that Buddha saying nothing truly exists means the illusory horses and the elephant are not the actual horses and the elephant. But it has sources. It's a product of its own cosmic conditions. So that is undeniably, it is the real. So here, when it comes to the terms, the pronunciations, Sutantika, and the Savatantrika. Sutantika means the school, this Buddhist school of thought, which is always literally, right, go with sutra, so Sutantika. And the Savatantrika means, Rangyu, so in Tibetan is Rangyu, Savatantrika means, and almost there's some kind of, self-sufficient. So it exists. It's not 100% projections. There's some kind of, some true nature from the basis, some true nature from the sources of their cosmic condition. The Savatantrika. And also I use this term, the Mahatma Gandhi, when he kind of, I think he started from South Africa. He used this term, Savaraj. Savaraj means, kind of, surviving on your own ability, not relying on others. Right, Savaraj. So he used the South Africa, and then we come to India, and continuously he kind of fight with British. Savaraj means now it they originated by yourself. Your lifestyle is caused by yourself. So Mahatma Gandhi, he make his own clothes, and he walk and get this what called salt, right, from the oceans. So so at that time, the British has to close many stores, fabric stores, and many of the products. So here the Savatantrika, Savaraj, Savatantrika means now things do exist by their own nature. Things do exist by their own natures. Things do exist from its own cause and conditions. Right. Sutantika and Savatantrikas. Sutantika means is it the abbreviations of the sutra and relying on the sutra literally. Right. So anyway, so this is what they find is the best example, the magician illusions. So magician illusions do exist from their own cosmic condition, and still these magician illusions are not true as it appears. So so the Prasangic school, all the examples, right? They if you choose any kind of example, it all signifies nothing really exists by their own nature. Nothing really exists from its own basis. So the dependent arising the dependent arising does not mean the entity do exist within the basis or arises from the basis. So the Pratitha Samutapats, dependent arising in the Prasangic school, is, if you project something, if you conceptually project something, by projecting that, and something else exists in your mind. Anyway, so now I'm going to read, presenting the truth and the falsity within the context of the worldly conventional through the analogy of the magicianal illusion. The analogy of the magicianal illusion has been held as a way of making one understood how something exists by virtue of being presented by the power of the mind, and how something exists without being presented in such manner. So by the power of the mind, so what is that mind? And then this mind referring to the sensory perceptions and mental perceptions, both. So power of the mind. So with sensory perceptions and with mental perceptions, things do exist from their own nature. Now, what does not truly exist without relying on sensory perceptions, without relying on mental perceptions, things do not exist from their own natures. Like, when the magician creates this illusory horse, the elephant, with the sensory perceptions which affected by the mantra, yes, this illusory horse and elephant do exist from these own cosmic conditions. Without the sensory perceptions affected by the mantra, and there is no illusory horses, there is no illusory elephant that exists from the substance. So it's kind of in the half, 50-50. So authentic middle ways is 50-50. There's something you can understand, things do exist by nature with perceptions. With observer, you can find something exists by nature. Without observer, without relying on observer, there is no such object that exists by their own natures. So the Prasangic schools now is saying 100% from the projections. So yeah, such manners, when the magician conjures horses and elephant from the pebble and stick, and so on, 3 types of people are present: the magician himself, and the spectators whose eyes are affected. So audience, right? And magician himself and audience, and the spectators whose eyes are unaffected. So there's another, the eye consciousness was not able to affect it by the mantras. So in the first case, the magician himself, the horse and the elephants is perceived but not apprehended. So magician himself is seeing this illusory horses and elephant, but because he knows these are not true. So that's the one thing. And while in the apprehended, in the second case, so spectators, the audience whose eye are affected by the mantras, it is both perceived and apprehended. So they are audience, they came for entertainment. So the illusory horses, the horses and the elephants, it appears to them at the same time they apprehend this is the horse and this is true, the elephant. While in the third, whose eyes are not affected, there is neither the perceptions nor the apprehension of the horses and the elephant. Now, when the basis for the conjuring, right? The illusion is perceived as a horses and elephant, unlike in mistaking rope for a snake. So I think this whole kind of idea is saying that in everyday life, the ordinary, so who has not following through the logic and the reasonings, and they rather go with presumptions and assumptions. So for them, every appearance, right, become the truly existence. So how many times the conceptual thought is projecting or outward emotional, so you project many things in your mind, it all kind of has, it all affects on you. And like a magician himself, so who has trained their mind and used the logic, they too have the same appearance, but because of their reasonings, they analyze and they find this does not truly exist. It appears but not truly exist. And then once the mind is totally subdued and tamed, and you kind of remove all the mistaken, right? So then this mind is like third party whose eyes are not affected. So it has no appearance of the illusion and no perceptions like real kind of phenomena. So it's also the kind of indicating that the suffering that we face every day is, as long as your mind and continuously projecting many objects within the mind, at the same time you're grasping, is always kind of lead to brings more suffering and more dissatisfactions, more fears. So although the mind is continuously projecting many things, but you always follow the logic and the reasonings. And yes, there is illusion-like appearance, but it does not really cause suffering much on you. And then the mind is totally free from the mental projections. That mind is is like permanently freedom from the misconceptions. That is the peace to pacifying all the mental construct. So yeah, many times mentioned that. So here the Dharma that we take refuge is total cessation of misconception. Is this cessation that we cessation of the suffering, cessation of the misconceptions, is the Dharma we take refuge. So I think, yeah, the every line is saying the cause of the suffering is the grasping in the mental constant. Like there's a one sutra. So there's a sutra saying that why not this poison like the poison like emotions not arising? Why not the poison like emotions not arising? Since you are grasping in the mental constant. So even you are right, you are not killing, you are not lying, but still you are living a life like picking the flowers and making the garlands and then selling it, and you're just very simple life. So there's always the possible of generating strong negative emotions, and out of that negative emotion create negative karma, can lead to the lower realm. Right? You're just your kind of everyday living, just picking up the flowers, making garland. You are not just going out killing people, right? You're not deceiving many people. So this misconception can be, even you're living a very simple life, misconception can cause the karma to be falling in the lower realm. So this is kind of, the constantly it's mentioning the cause of the suffering is the misconception. So now for the magicians, the illusory elephant or the horses is presented from the point of view of how it appears to the erroneous perceptions. It is not presented, however, from the point of view of the basis for conjuring, right, the illusions. From the perspective of the spectators, however, the appearance of the horses and the elephant does not seem to be presented through the power of the mind. So the magician sees that, yes, there is illusion like illusory elephant and horses, but they are all projected, exist due to my affected eye. So it's not really causing much suffering to him. And the audience whose eyes are affected, so this can be scary, this can be so exciting, because every appearance truly exists for them. So now, here this is through the power of mind. Rather, they apprehended real horses and elephant, fully occupying space on the very spot where it is being perceived. This is how, on the basis of the analogies, one apprehends something to be presented through the power of mind or not presented through it. So two things. Knowing this whole projected by my mind, or not knowing this whole projected by my mind. So when an appearance is perceived in relation to the given basis, there are two possibilities. One, where what appears to constitute the mode of existence as perceived, and another where it does not. So, so this is like in a two person at the same kind of having the same dream, and one person understands this whole comes from my mind, and not much. There's not much kind of turbulence in their mind. One, they think this whole truth is very kind of troublesome for this one who believes in the true existence. By the comprehending this point well, one will be able to avoid the confusions that arises from the thought. Since objects are established by the valid cognitions, and since the valid cognitions are themselves cognitive state, their establishment of the objects would constitute the object of being presented through the power of the cognitions. In that case, the true existing will be negated even in the system of the Buddhist as essentialist. So the truth kind of total, the existing of that is so like magicians, appearance is there, but there's no apprehensions. That really helps you to reduce the fear. And the audience whose eye affected, the appearance there, it appears at the same time you're apprehending there's a whole truth. In that case, the true existing will be negated, even the system, the essentialist. The system, so because this whole book is based on the Prasangika school point of view, so Prasangika school always refer this other school of thought like essentialist. So one will thus be able to disentangle the conflations of these two senses. So for the sense in which objects are said to be defined by the valid cognition, it refers to the two classes of the objects being cognized by the valid cognitions. So this sense is very different from the previous sense of the object of being presented by virtue of the power of cognitions. So this is a little bit kind of, for the debate. Anyway, now saying everything, that object that appears to your mind is, due to the subject, your perceptions. Due to your perceptions, there are kind of, the various of the object appears. All these objects have some kind of intrinsic nature. The object do exist by their own nature because of the perceptions. When your mind is affected, and objects that appears to the mind is the real. So, so I think here the power of the cognitions means now, according to the Yogacarya Madhyamikas, the appearance of the illusions established by the reflexive awareness. So this is called sometimes self-knowing, something. Right? According to the Savatantrika middle way, which accept external reality, it is established by the sensory perceptions that apprehends either the basis, such as what's the invariance, or the empty space, that it does not exist in the way it is perceived, is established through the such reasoning. So there's illusory elephant and the horses. So it is perceived with the direct perceptions or mental perceptions. So then it says, yes, it's a direct perceptions. With your eye, you are seeing the magician, the horses, and the elephant. And then this, if this is direct perceptions, these direct perceptions should have some kind of validity to understand, or there's some kind of true nature. So then, what is that object that you're directly perceiving, and this horses and elephant appears? So, Tantric middle way says, direct perception, that directly perceiving the space. Right? So directly perceiving the space or the basis. And with that, and then this illusory horses and elephant appears. So because the sensory perceptions is no quality of the understanding or apprehending as a horse is an elephant. For example, sometime at night with the flashlight, you go, and then suddenly, because of that light in the different directions, and that also creates your shadow. So when the shadow that appears to the mind, the direct consciousness, direct perceptions, and the perceiving the shadow, you may mistakenly think, oh, there's someone who's moving, right? Someone with me, right? So then, so the shadow as a human being, perceiving shadow as the human being is the wrong perceptions. Any wrong perceptions has no knowable object. So here, the sensory perceptions, which appears the shadow as human being, at the same time, it is not totally wrong perception. It's just mistaken with respect to the appearance of the shadow. So what this sensory perceptions perceiving or kind of realizing is the space. Space by realizing the space and the shadow at the same time. So you are mistaken with respect to the shadow as a human being, but you are you're perceiving that appearance with this kind of in the space or the ground. So yeah, and sometimes we do that in school. So if you're standing in the sun and you look at your shadow, right? Maybe 5 minutes you look in the shadow, and suddenly you look up in the sky, you will see your shadow in the sky. Have you do that? so for example, if you're standing here in the sun and you see your shadow, you're just staring at it 5 minutes, and suddenly look up in the sky, you will see the kind of, right? Logan knows that.
yeah. Like if you stare at something and then you look somewhere else, that thing you see, you'll see over there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So here, this is kind of like this, the way you see entertain the illusory elephant and horses. So that's through the sensory perceptions. This sensory perceptions is a direct perceptions. It is not a wrong perceptions. So to prove this is not wrong perceptions, so you have to prove, has it realized any kind of object? And yes, he said, it realized the space. It perceives the space. With that space, and there is the illusory horses and the elephant. Now, this is the wrong or mistaken with respect to the illusory elephant and the horses as the real horses and the elephant, but it's still not mistaken with the space that they precede. So here is what the main point is.
Well, you're seeing something. You're seeing something without interpretation. So in that way, it's not mistaken. But as soon as there's interpretation or labeling, there's probably some distortion right away in that. In other words, you can say, oh, you see an unlabeled, something unlabeled, but I mean, you can still, it seems to me you can still missee it. Like optical illusion, like for example, optical illusion. So is this a true perception? You think you see what you see, but it's actually not what you
see.
What you think.
You see what you see, but it's not actually you're not seeing it. So is it CEE or CEA? I think here what it's trying to say is a sensory perceptions. Like a magician himself has the appearance of the horses and the elephant. And because of his understanding, these are all kind of happen there because of my perceptions. Right? There is no real horses. There is no elephant at all, but it still appears. So now the question is, through a sensory perception that you're seeing the illusory, the elephant and horses, or you are seeing through the mental projections, through the mind. And then he says, yes, the sensory perceptions. Through the sensory perceptions, I see the horses and elephant. Now, so question is, if this eye consciousness, which is seeing the the illusory horses and elephant. So is this I consciousness is apprehending with this I consciousness? Do you apprehend illusory horse and elephant as a real horse and elephant? The magicians I consciousness do not apprehend the illusory horses and the elephant as a real horse and elephant. The audience whose eyes are affected, so they apprehend as it appears, right? So now here they're now having this kind of making distinctions, and then questions. So magicians' eye consciousness, right, perceive the illusory horses and the elephant. So is this eye consciousness is wrong perceptions or not a wrong, the valid perception? Then the answer is it's not a wrong perceptions, although it appears the kind of the real horse and real elephant, but the eye with this eye consciousness is not a wrong perception. Now the question is, if it's not wrong perceptions, it is the valid cognition or not? And we say yes, the valid cognitions. So what it has perceived. So here they say it perceives the space. With the space, it appears an elephant and horse. This is they're trying to say. Yeah.
This reminds me of a story someone told me in college. This guy was actually his family was Russian in China, but and then they lived in South America. And at some point, he went to a. It was a group. There was like a hypnotist who can hypnotize a lot of people, and the hypnotist said to everyone, I guess he was an extremely good hypnotist, extraordinary, that the room was flooding. And Nick told me that even these old women and men went on top of their chairs because they saw the water coming up in the room. This is, to me, a kind of very similar thing. But I have trouble accepting this as a valid cognition because their minds were manipulated, and they weren't even exactly seen through their senses. It was all by suggestion that everyone was seen as and believed. They saw what they saw, but it wasn't with their eyes. So I don't see this as a valid cognition. I don't see how you can say that.
Yeah. So I think here, valid cognitions means there's for example here, the wrong perceptions and the valid cognitions, two things. The wrong perceptions means it always mistaken with respect to the actual object is the wrong perceptions, right? So valid cognitions mean not mistaken with respect to the actual object. So I think this is how you make a distinction between valid and wrong perceptions. Now, when it comes to the mistaken with respect to the actual object means, how about the mental consciousness has two objects. Sensory perceptions is one object. The sensory perceptions like eye consciousness, the object of eye consciousness is the color or the shape. And for the thought, there's two. One is the imaginations, and the second is the indirect object, actual object. Through the imaginations and the thought consciousness always try to perceive something, the actual object, through mental, through imagination. So the thought always tends to have two objects. One, the direct object that's projected by the thought itself, and the second, through that, what they're trying to understand. Like for example, mentally, when I see where I parked my car, so this thought, the eye consciousness couldn't see the car in the parking lot, but the mind trying to see the car through by mediation. So creating the imagination of the car, where you park, right? And through that, so that direct imagination is the direct object, that is appearance, and then actual object. So through this imagination, what they're trying to understand, they're trying to say real action car. So and similarly here, this eye consciousness, right, the eye consciousness, who is kind of experiencing the illusory elephant and horses, right? So this eye consciousness is hard to prove. This is the wrong perception because it, so with this eye consciousness, you can remember. It will kind of, brings the knowledge of seeing the kind of, the illusory horses and elephant. This eye consciousness, with this eye consciousness, you can remember that I have seen this his magicianal illusion. So this eye consciousness is totally wrong perceptions. Then there is no possible of, right, remember something that you have perceived. So now the question is, this eye consciousness have an appearance of the horses and the elephant is mistaken. There is no horse, there's no elephant. So therefore they say eye consciousness is kind of, this is the mistaken with respect to the appearance of the horses and the elephant, but it is not mistaken that you are seeing this with that space. So when you see things with ground, so although the appearance is the non-existing, the ground that you see, every time you see the ground, and that reminds you, oh, I saw this on this place. So
you understand the problem I'm having with this is that you can believe you see it through your eyes, but you're not, and you don't think you're imagining even, but you're actually not seeing it through your eyes. You're seeing it as a process of, possibly as a process of suggestion. It's a totally, your senses, you're mistaking your senses as an object of, as the source of the perception, but it's really got nothing, it may have nothing to do with your senses, even though you believe it is. So, therefore, I'm kind of pushing back at you here. How could you even tell? Because in this case I gave, clearly people aren't seen through their eyes. They believe they're seen through their eyes.
Anyway, so so I did what I could do. So, no regrets. I put my all effort. So yeah. now the main point here is the disturbance. Mental disturbance is due to the not knowing the object, how object that exist, right, through the power of the projections. So the suffering or discomfort or unpleasant the state of experience is due to not knowing the object that exists due to the power of the perceptions. So this is Sautantrika middle way saying that. Right? If you understand anything that appears in your mind exists due to the power of mind. So sensory perception, all the mental perceptions. This is what we need to know. Right? Everything that appears in your mind, anything that exists in your mind are always due to the power of the perceptions. Right? So objects do not exist by themselves without the power of the mind. So Swatantrika middle way saying, so truly existing means object truly existing means object exist by their own essence without depending on, without relying on your mind. So that's the kind of Swatantrika, trying to kind of point out this is what we are negating. We are not negating the inherent nature or intrinsic nature. We are not saying that nothing exists by their own essence. So we are simply saying things do not exist from their own essence without sensory perceptions and mental perceptions. So now only says things do exist by their own essence with sensory perception, with mental perceptions. So it's with these perceptions, things could exist by their own essence. Without these perceptions, things could not exist by their own essence. So the best example, like the illusion. Magicianal illusions exist from its own causes and conditions when there is the perceptions that perceiving, right, the magicianal illusions. So without the mind that being affected by the mantra and the substance, right, no illusions, magicianal illusion could exist by their own essence. So it's kind of 50-50. From the object side, there's something from the subject side. So the kind of, together there's something. Without one, there's nothing. Right. So yeah, that by the comprehending the point well, according to Yogacharya, where was it? Yogacharya, yeah. So reflexive awareness, according to the Savatantrika middle ways, with accept external reality, it is established by the sensory perceptions that apprehends either the base, such as the environment, empty space that does not exist in the way it is perceived, established through the such reasoning as if it did exist in such manner. This would be seen by the unaffected eyes as well. But this is not the case. Unaffected minds, the mind that is free from misconceptions, has no appearance of things exist by their own essence. Right. So magician and the audience whose eye affected, and magician himself, there is the illusory elephant. Now, another third persons whose eyes are not affected, they don't see the illusory elephant and horses. What they see is this pebble and sticks, and he is reciting some mantras. So other than that, there is no illusory elephant and the horses. So this is like the Buddha's omniscient has no kind of illusory kind of phenomena that appears to his mind. So when through negations such as this, there is convergence of its appearance as such and it being empty of such, then from the perspective of the ordinary conventional cognitions that is not seeped in the philosophical standpoint, so appearance is such and being empty of such. So nangtong, right? So sometimes Sakya, the kind of traditions, the term they use, clarity and empty. Setong sungju, so union of clarity and empty, right? So as here, the similar, the appearance and they are empty of nature. And appearance of the horses and elephant, and they are empty of actual elephant and horses. So this combined together, and this appearance won't deceive the mind. Right? Perspective, ordinary conventional concerns are not seen in the philosophical standpoint. Such an illusion is established to be a falsehood. This cognition of falsehood and the cognitions that establish mirror image to be empty of what is the appear to be, therefore do not constitute either cause or the several level of relation, as a rational cognition, rational, right? Pertaining to the suchness, even the respect to the true existing from the perspective of ordinary conventional cognitions generally, when there is appearance of things as being something, then it being empty of such, a thing simply does not occur. Similarly, when it is found to be empty of being such thing, it appears as such, just does not occur. Where there is indeed convergence of the two, like mirror image, such things are false even from the perspective of ordinary conventional cognitions. So this magicianal illusions is the best example that could understand from the ordinary point of view and philosophical point of view. So they commonly accept the magician illusions. It do not exist as it appears, right? And like a mirror image, your face, even the ordinary people understands it looks the real, but not the real, right? So yeah, that's the kind of explaining the analogy of the relation to the actual referent, just like those spectators whose eyes have been affected when outer and inner phenomena appears as a truly existing sentient being grasped at these phenomena not as possessed by the virtual power of the mind, but it existing in their own right. So I think, I mentioned earlier, same thing. When you see things do exist by their own essence without kind of, presenting by the power of the mind. So that is the negation element. Things do exist by their own essence without presenting by the power of the mind. So without mind, if things exist by their own essence, that is the truly existence. This is what the Sovatantrika middle ways is negating, refuting. So so this Sovatantrika schools, they think this is the best kind of middle way, right? You are not negating the, negating, nothing really exists by their own essence. So if you negate like that, and then it may kind of lead you to fall into nihilism. So this is just like a spectators whose eyes have been affected. Outer and inner phenomena appears to truly exist. Sentient beings grasp at these phenomena not as presented by the virtue of the power of mind, but existing in their own right. So this is the innate grasping at truly existing, true existing that has persisted since the beginningless time. So now the root of the suffering here, the second existing, what holds the second existing, the root cause, and this Savatantric middle way is saying this misconception, the grasping as the phenomena, grasping as a truly existing. Right? Truly existing means things exist by their own essence without being presented by the power of the mind, is the innate kind of the root of the afflictive emotions. This is the root of the samsara. So in this particular school, compared to the mind grasping at the object of negations, as defined by the Prasangika school, this presentation of the Savatantrika middle way is very coarse and therefore does not constitute the subtle innate grasping at truly existence. So the Prasangika school says, no, this is not the innate grasping itself. This is the very core level of the, identifying the misconceptions. But still, Prasangika school, yes, this is the misconception, but it's not the settled one. Nevertheless, when true existing as conceived by the such grasping has been negated through reasoning, then just like the magicians, one will no longer apprehend outer and inner phenomena as possessing a mode of existence not presented by the cognitions. One will come to understand them as existings merely established by the virtue of power of cognition. So, and it is these things established by the virtue of the power of the cognitions and not, invalidated by the valid cognitions that are accepted to possess conventional existence. Is not the case that whatever the mind presented except to have conventional existence. So now the Savatantrika school said anything in your life, in your mind, is always exists due to the power of your own perceptions. Right? So do you see the difference? The things existing in your mind is due to the power of your own perceptions. So, but still they don't say the existing of a phenomena is 100% totally projected by your perceptions. They are not saying this. It's whole projected by your mind. Things do exist, right, with your mind, with your perceptions. So I think it's like, for example, there's a kind of, the woman, and with relation to her children, with relation to her husband, with relation to her mother. So with relation to the children, she is mother, not a wife. With relation to the husband, she is a wife, not a daughter. With relation to the mother, she is daughter, not the wife. So the object that appears to the mind, right, with relation to the sensory perceptions, with relation to the mental perceptions too. So now the Sautanic middle says, with relation to the sensory perceptions and mental perceptions, things do exist. There's a something you can say, that is, there is. So it is not 100% projections. If there is no common ground, this one single woman, right? If there's no common ground, the one single woman cannot be perceived mother, daughter, husband, kind of, wife. So there must be a common ground. There's something that she exists, right? Exist as a female. So therefore, from the children's perspective, she is mother. From the husband's perspective, she is the wife. For mother's perspective, she is the daughter. So, but still, there is the common ground.
This is like the elephant, right? Seen by the blind man, and one feels the leg, one feels there is a common ground. They're all feeling the elephant, but they're all experience it from the reference of what they're interacting with the portion of the elephant that they're interacting with. This is the same, right?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So the blind man who only touches the elephant trunk, so he say, "Oh, elephant's like a pipe," right? So yeah, and then the one who touches the leg, then he has another kind of, but they all have the kind of they all understands the elephant. So with different kind of different with different object, with different characteristics, right? But so still, so without these perceptions, there is no such thing that exists as elephant from the trunk. There is no elephant that exists from the leg or hand or head. So it's the there's a common ground, one objects, and then the perceptions together. It can be many. So still, this is I think this is the best kind of way of presenting Savatanic middle ways as a common ground, something together, something combined. Things are becoming different, right? So this is why the Savatanic middle way says things do exist by their own essence, their natures, but the things existing from their nature is again because of the power of the perception. Right? So if there's no mother, the female's there, no mother, no children, no husband, she cannot be anything. Right? So with children, husband, mother, then she becoming many. So this is the Savatantaka, Chandrakirti, Kamalashila, and Baba Vivek, their understanding emptiness is like that. Right?
Does it mean that something exists because because of the perception, that means perception always exists, true?
Perceptions is also kind of, existing by depending on object. Yeah, it's just dependent. So in this from this point of view, according to this Svatanic middle way, so now they have a different definitions of the dependent arising. So dependence is almost like there's a two dependent arising means two entity, right? So depending each other's. The way they're depending is unlike the Prasangic school. Prasangic school, so when things are dependent, when the two things are dependent arising, so the Prasangic school says this one entity is the existing or the arising of the one entity is 100% by depending on other entity. That very entity is also arising just because of the other entity. Like for example, this seeing, act of seeing and the seer. So if you try to find objective look at, I want to see the seer without seeing. And the Prasangic Guru said, there's no way you can find the seer without act of seeing. So they do not exist independent. And the seeing itself, act of seeing itself, is not found within the eye sense power, not found in the color, not found in the consciousness. So they do not exist from their own essence. They do not, any entity, active seeings do not exist from any basis. So the dependent arising is that the meaning of the dependent arising become very different. So in ordinary dependent arising means, so one physical substantial is a depending, like a flower depending on the pot, all men depending on the can, right? So two things they're leaning each other. Right? So South Africa is a little bit different. So sentient being, so compared to the mind grasping at the object of negation, so defined by the Prasangic schools as a core, very coarse, and therefore does not constitute the settled, innate grasping at true existence. Nevertheless, when true existing as a conceit by such grasping has been negated through the reasoning, then just like the magician, one will no longer apprehend outer and inner phenomena as possessing a mode of existence not presented by the cognitions. One will come to understand them as existing merely as established by the virtual power of cognitions. And it is those things established by the virtue of the power of cognitions, not invalidated by the valid cognitions that are possess conventional existence is not the case. Whatever the mind possesses is except to have conventional realities. So now again, it's another kind of big distinction. Yes, things do exist due to the power of the perceptions. Now, anything that exists, so that does not mean anything that exists due to the power of perceptions are real. So which means, with anger, with very kind of strong anger, and even its most kind of desirable things become ugly, right? So something you have you liked, and with anger, it is unlikable, undesirable. So that is that desirable object as undesirable is due to the anger. So anything that exists due to the perceptions, power of the perception, not necessarily is the conventional reality. But conventional reality has to exist due to the has to be exist by presenting the presenting by the sensory perceptions or the mental perceptions. So suppose our cognitions presented the arising of the sprout from its seed. This does not contradict with the sprout arising from their seed on their own part as well. So now here, this school of thought is saying that the sprout arising from the seed, sprout arising from the seed. So although the arising of the sprout is due to the presented by the power of the mind, but arising of the sprout from the seed is also the intrinsically exists. Similarly, things that are the basis for the conjuring, the illusions, do appears on their parts too. As a horse and elephant, by this one should understand the way all phenomena exist on the conventional level. Since even the ultimate nature is established by the virtue of its appearance to the cognitions that perceives it, it does not stand the counterexample to the entailment. Whatever is established by the virtue of the power of the cognitions necessarily being conventional existence. Therefore, the following is definitely not the sense in which analogy of illusions is to be understood. Just as illusions appears as a horse and elephant, but is empty of them. All things such as vase appears as a vase, so on, but are the devoid of vase, and so on. For if that were so, there could be a nothing that could be said to be itself. So furthermore, the pebbles being drawn between the analogies, and its reference here would be in the terms of their appearance as such, but not in the terms of their actuality. So things here, the things do not exist as it appears means you have to be interpreted like the Sauthantika middle way. Things do exist, right? Presented by the perceptions, cognitions, right? Like illusory horses and elephants exist by the power of the mind, but the illusory elephant and the horses are not horse and not elephant. This is how things do not exist as it appears. So another interpretation is things do not exist as it appears means the vase do not exist as a vase as appears. If you interpret that way, so then it is a wrong interpretation. So here table do not exist as independent without depending on I consciousness, right? Without depending on the I consciousness, table do not exist by their own essence. So you shouldn't be interpreting like table do not exist as a table to the I consciousness. Right? So rather here, table do not exist without depending on I consciousness. Yeah, I think why the Lama Tsongkaphas he kind of specifically pointing this, because at that time the many people, many great masters, they are so excited about the emptiness. So there are a lot of misinterpretations of emptiness. So I mentioned one of the story that New York, His Holiness giving a Heart Sutra teaching. So one man, he goes out after the teaching, goes out walking in the rain, and someone says, "Oh, don't just come inside the house. You may get sick." And he said, "There's no rain," because he interpreted the emptiness of the rain is no rain, right? So he does not believe there's a rain, because the rain is not truly exist. Therefore, rain they don't exist. Right? So there are many at the masters, because they're so excited in the emptiness. For them, the emptying is emptying the conventional, emptying the object. So we are not emptying the object itself, emptying, exaggerated the characteristic. Right? Superimposition of it, so we are emptying. So emptiness of the table is not emptying the table.
Does that mean this point is Lama Tsongkapha is saying how to properly understand the Svatantrika's point of view, how to see the emptiness?
Yes, yeah. Svatantrika, middle way. So because the Svatantrika middle way, then kind of their from their point of view, so emptiness is the empty of the things existing without depending on the perceptions. So now at the point, you want to say something? Okay.
It's just I have to watch my power. I have 7% left, so I'm just saying, do we need to get my iPad? That's all.
Okay. So we have 15 minutes. Maybe last. At the point the non-conceptual nooses of the meditative equipoise has arisen, within that perspective, all dualistic appearances are pacified, have neither the perceptions nor the apprehension of the illusions. So meditative equipoise means direct perceptions, that observing in emptiness. So there is no appearance of the illusion-like phenomena. There is even no subject, no object. So the meditative equipoise means the consciousness, the kind of become inseparable with emptiness. So there is no notion of object and subject. So with that, there is no table, there is no persons, there's nothing in the face of that direct perceptions. So I think maybe this is the one why Lama Tsongkapha is the kind of brought this kind of, how say, things when it comes to explaining emptiness. And some masters, like Hashang in Tibet, but some masters, the emptiness for them is kind of, seeing nothing, thinking nothing, right? So that is their emptiness. So then when they say seeing nothing, thinking nothing is the emptiness, and what is the table? What is yourself? What is the, Buddha? What is the Dharma? And then this is, this whole exists in the misconception. So it's kind of, the yeah, it's a big misconception, it's a big mistake.
But frankly, this sounds, I can't think of the best example of this, but like, for example, in Dzogchen, they say, look at the space between thoughts, or look at where the thought or the emotion comes from. And if you really look at it, your mind will just, well, this is my understanding anyhow. Your mind will just rest. It won't be in a state of duality. And when I try to do that, at least occasionally, and when I do that, sometimes I'm in a state of no thought, it seems to me. And that sounds actually somewhat simple to how you describe Ashiyan here. That there isn't any longer a state of referential perception in that state. It's referenceless. And I mean, of course, even in the Bardo, in the Bardo, after the moment of death, they talk, there's a swoon and there's a point of being in a referenceless state. And that sounds actually very much like Ashiyan. Sometimes I think I'm not quite convinced because Hashang seems to be going beyond concept, and that's what he was kind of his manner of teaching. But that seems very, very similar to me, of seeing directly the nature of the thought or the space in between thought. It's a state of non-duality, and I'm not sure I see a genuine distinction here. He may not have the conceptual underpinnings of like Nagarjuna or Chandrakirti, but it seems to me that non-dual state is the essence of shedding all these kind of conceptual references that keep us in a state of suffering.
Yeah. So I met those some of those the meditators, the Hashang. So this is yes, when they follow the instructions, the meditations. So they find some kind of pleasant and peace in the meditations. At the same time, it has some kind of damages, and then these kind of what do you call? It makes you more nervous and more hesitations in the everyday life. So if you in that meditations, there's some kind of peace there, and then you cannot really kind of find the balance in the everyday life. So everyday life, you have less confidence. So I think, so this is meditation, maybe I would say, deliberately putting yourself in the coma, trying to put yourself in the coma again and again. So
No, I'm not convinced of this, because I knew this is the one person I ever saw this with, of any master I ran across. I knew he was an American who was a Korean Zen lineage holder. And if you asked him a question, there was no space between your question and the answer. It was immediate. It was almost like he perceived your question before he asked it. He perceived your question before you asked it, and there was no hesitation. It was like it just cut directly through, and I didn't perceive any anxiety or anything. I know he was also a psychologist to work with a lot of suicidal people, but I couldn't describe him that way, as being in the state of anxiety at all. I've never seen this kind of instantaneous reaction. Usually there's a space between the question and the answer, but not with him.
Okay, any questions? Any questions? $5, $5. One question. In India, we go to train stations. They're always chai. Questions. So I think when you study those non-Buddhist schools, each schools, their point of views, their finding, their way of finding their own kind of, true. So you can study a lot. So it really gives you the kind of, the clarity in this different Buddhist school of thought. So if you study more in the non-Buddhist school, and you have more convincing in the Buddhist school of thought. So I think it's comparing is very important, not to kind of, deprecating this other school of thought, but to find more confidence in your own the kind of, Buddhist school of thought. You need to study the other school. Sometimes you find many non-Buddhist schools. In India, we have said, kind of, Bhate bananas. They're studying, they're educating themselves, the way of saying. They find the skill just to present. Then there's no kind of intent to knowing what is the truth. So if you try and skill yourself the way of saying and presenting, so just you can continue to say anything, right? But it has to be grounded on some point. If it's pointless, if continue saying, so I think it's the limitless, the phenomena. So right now you talk about cow, then when it comes to tail, then you can go to the horse tail, and the horse you finish talking about, and then so horse hoof, and then go to another. So you can endlessly talk. So it's not like a way of talking, a way of kind of, but try to prove, establish some kind of point of view. So some kind of significance. So Vaibhashika school, they talk about the 3 times divided into 9 times, so they can talk whole many pages, but all based on there's not much essence in it, but they can talk like present, the past of the present, future, and the one present has a present, past, present. So so this is Buddha Bali says, right? Buddha Bali says, you are finding the bride for unborn son. so that the very things that you're trying to explain is not exist, but there you want to characterize on that thing. So they're finding the bride with unborn son. So I think here the middle way, Swatantrika middle way is perceptions and presenting on a phenomena or designing or designating, then things do exist. So now this for them is not 100% projections. Right? There is some kind of common ground, and with perceptions, it's changing its characteristics. Like I said, the females, the one in the middle is the common ground, and with the relation to the children, the husband and mothers, and their characters changes. So the Prasangika school says, so things do exist by presenting, right? Kind of presenting by the power of the perceptions. So if things do exist by their own essence, without depending on it, without relying on perception, then that is the truly existing. We need to negate the empty. In the Prasangika school, nothing, any kind of things, they don't exist by their own essence, by nature. So everything is like a reflection, like a rainbow-like phenomena. Right? So this is a whole kind of different way of the kind of point of views. Different point of views are they're all trying to find the cessation of the suffering. How can I find the cessation, end of afflictive emotions? So they're all trying to find the end of cause of suffering. So they may have kind of some degree of experiencing through their own point of view some kind of weakening the afflictive emotions, reducing the suffering. So I think that's the kind of main thing here. Then, I thought I can finish the one page. So, and then here they're saying that I think that they all agree on one thing, that we are living a life within the mental projections. So the mental projections is the one that creates the human drum. The human drums is the creation of your mental projections. So then, if the human drum is existing through the mental projections, the God drum is also existing through the mental projections. And animal drums, hell drums, the hungry ghosts, that these different drums are due to the mind. So when the mind changes, their drum changes. And the Dhammapadas, the story, and the Buddha trying to explain kind of the ordinary way. So to someone asks, how do I know there is the God realm? There's what we call slation, right? And then how do I know there's the hell realm? And Buddha told the stories. There's one businessman, and his every year he goes out to the business. So one day his wife gave birth to the son, and that makes him so happy. So every time when he comes back from the business, he just holds his son, and he feels like he's in heaven. So that happened for a while, and one day the one time he went out for the business for a longer period. So then when he come back, his son is sick. And then gradually that son died. And then that ruined his whole life. Business not good, and not happy in home, not happy outside. So you see, so what conditioned him to feel like heaven at one time, and what conditioned him, what caused him to kind of see his life like a hell realm. So this two mind, it creates kind of slash kind of the God realm or the animal realm, the hungry ghosts. So mind is the one. There is no hell realms is built by engineering, or there's no hell realm fire that is caused by matches or lighters. There is no God realms. There are kind of grounds, the trees like very beautiful, and they kind of the grounds like a sponge. Is there is no hard kind of ground. So what is the making? Who is kind of making these things? So your mind. So you have the karma to experience, and then your mind, it creates this kind of beautiful environment. So you are living in that, your mental projections, your creations. And then when the karma has finished and they all dissolve and they're back to the space, nothing. And then another karma that leads you to the born somewhere, and that creates another realms. So the turning wheel of the dharmas, there's three lines repeating. Three lines. First line is this: this is the truth of suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path that leads to liberations. And the second round, Buddha says, suffering to understand. So Buddha did not mention suffering need to be abandoned. Suffering to understand. Overcoming suffering is understanding suffering. And the origin of the suffering is to abandon by applying the antidote. And the cessation is not just obtained by hand or reward. Cessation to actualize. The power to meditate. That's the second line. Third line is, right, there is no suffering to understand. There is no origin to abandon. There is no cessation to actualize. There is no path to meditate. So now more to the kind of, trying to understand what is that suffering that you're trying to understand. Does suffering really exist objectively? Or does suffering exist by their own essence? So when we examine what is the suffering, you cannot find suffering as an independent or objective. So in the absence of intrinsic nature, so within the absence of intrinsic nature, there is no suffering to understand, because the suffering itself is conventionally, it has to be projected by the mind. And there is no origin of the suffering to abandonment. There is no attachment that you can, so there is no attachment that is being independent from the antidote, like, virus and the vaccine. So two substantial entity, one kind of overcomes another. The afflictive emotions and the realization of emptiness is not like the virus and the vaccine. So simply, you just increases and improve the realization of emptiness. By that, all the afflictive emotion dissolve within the emptiness, within the realization of emptiness. It's not really kind of, two substantial phenomena and against each other. So you see, because the phenomena and the varieties of the phenomena, they exist due to the many varieties of the subject. The phenomena, the varieties, kind of, is not because of they themselves, right? They kind of, separated, they exist separately. So the main thing is conventional means fabrications. Fabrications mean conceptually, verbally, and constructed. Other than that, there is no such thing as a conventional. So here the Prasanga is, this is how you find the cessations, end of the cause of suffering. So, and Shantideva says, Nyomo Shira make a bounce. So here's the kind of, the delusional, the Nyomo. And Tibetans, there's two repeating words, Nyomo. And the Sanskrit, almost like the stupid afflictive emotions overcome by the wisdom. Right? So there's these afflictive emotions to overcome, right? You don't have to hire people to destroy it, or you don't have to buy things to destroy it, or you do not any kind of, strength of the muscle of you to destroy it. Just simply generate the wisdom. So Nyomo Shira Mikipang. So Mikipang means just by seeing the reality. Okay. Chanju Simjo Remoje, Majebana, Jeji, Geba Nyamba, Mevanya, Konde Pebbles. Onye Tawa Remoje, Majebana, Jeji, Geba Nyamba, Mevanya, Konde Pebbles. Pama Simjen Tamjen, Data Denju, Yandro Tamje, Tato Toma. Chanju Simba, Kanda Sushi, Tata Kunji, Monon Juptu, Carrera Veko, Shimazu, Pendan, the woman, and Joe. Jeresima, Tinzi Jazu, Shabba Side Badu Denju.
May the precious holy light that yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline but increase forever. May the precious mind realizing emptiness that yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline but increase forever. Due to all these merits, may all father and mother sentient beings have all the happiness, and may all grace be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. O powerful intrinsic Gautama, remain in these words until samsara ends.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.